Nobody told you this in school, but 30,000 years before the first church was built, before the first prayer was written, before anyone gave God a name, someone knelt down in the dirt and begged something invisible for help. And we found the proof. Not in a book, not in a scripture, in a cave. Buried so deep underground that sunlight had never touched it. On the walls, painted in red and black, were hands. Hundreds of human hands. Pressed against stone, reaching outward as if asking something on the other side to reach back. That image should not exist. These were people who spent every single day fighting to survive. They had no food security, no shelter that guaranteed safety, no medicine. Death was everywhere, constantly, without warning. They had no time for anything that didn't directly keep them alive, and yet they went deep into the darkest caves on earth carrying fire and paint it. Why? Scientists spent decades assuming it was just decoration, art for art's sake. But then something changed. Researchers started noticing patterns. The paintings weren't random. They were always in the same locations, inside caves, the deepest, most hidden chambers, places that took hours to reach, places where the silence was so complete it felt alive, places where if your torch went out, you would never find your way back. Nobody decorates a place nobody can see. These chambers weren't galleries, they were something else entirely. Then came the burial sites, and this is where it gets deeply unsettling. Archaeologists began finding graves, not just bodies left where people died, graves deliberately dug, bodies carefully arranged, knees pulled to chest, hands folded, and beside them, objects, tools they would need, food they could eat, flowers placed over their bodies so deliberately that the pollen was still preserved in the soil 50,000 years later. Think about what that means. These humans believed something continued after death. They believed the dead person was going somewhere, and they wanted to make sure they had what they needed for the journey. This wasn't superstition, this was theology. 50,000 years before any religion officially existed. But here's the detail that changes everything. The flowers found in those graves weren't random wildflowers. They were medicinal plants, plants that ancient humans used to heal the sick. Which means whoever was buried there wasn't just being honored, they were being sent into death with the tools of a healer. Someone important died, and the people who loved them believed with complete certainty that those healing tools would still be needed on the other side. That belief had to come from somewhere. You don't bury someone with medicine for the afterlife unless you have already spent a long time thinking about what the afterlife is. So the question isn't whether ancient humans believed in something beyond themselves. The evidence already answers that. The real question is far more disturbing. How did beings with no language, no teachers, no scripture, and no shared culture independently arrive at the same conclusion? In caves separated by thousands of miles and tens of thousands of years. Because they did. Every ancient human group ever studied on every continent developed some form of belief in something beyond death, without contact with each other, without communication, without any way to share the idea, which means this belief didn't spread from person to person. It emerged from inside, from something already written into the human mind before civilization even began. And that is where science runs out of easy answers. Because here is what researchers found when they stopped looking at the artifacts and started looking at the brain itself. Humans are the only species on Earth that instinctively searches for patterns in chaos. The only species that looks at a random event and automatically asks why, not how. Why? A lion does not ask why its prey escaped, it just hunts again. But a human, sitting alone after losing someone they loved, cannot stop asking why them? Why now? Why at all? That question, that single unstoppable why, may be the origin of everything. Every god ever worshipped, every prayer ever spoken, every ritual ever performed. All of it may have started with one ancient human, sitting in the dark, unable to stop asking a question the universe refused to answer. And so they invented an answer. Not out of stupidity, out of necessity, because a mind that can ask why cannot function without a response. The silence was unbearable, so they filled it. But here is the twist that no one talks about. The oldest religious symbols ever found are not images of gods, they are not temples or altars or sacred texts. They are Venus figurines. small carved figures of women found buried across thousands of miles of ancient earth, in locations separated by entire continents. These figures predate every known religion by 20,000 years, and yet they were clearly sacred, clearly intentional, clearly meaningful to the people who made them and buried them. Nobody knows exactly what they meant. That is the honest answer. Researchers have theories: fertility symbols, mother goddess, protection during childbirth, but the truth is the meaning died with the people who carved them, which means the very first sacred object in human history is also one of the greatest unsolved mysteries in human history. And this is where the story becomes personal. Because these ancient humans, the ones painting hands on cave walls, burying their dead with medicine and flowers, carving sacred figures in the dark, they were not primitive. Their brains were identical to yours, same size, same structure, same capacity for thought, emotion, grief, wonder, and terror. They were you, living in a different world with nothing to protect them, asking the same questions you ask, and they came to the same conclusion you might reach if you sat alone long enough in complete silence: that something is out there, that death is not the end, that the darkness answers back if you are willing to listen. We built religions around that feeling, we built civilizations around it. Every church, every mosque, every temple ever constructed was built by someone trying to answer the same question those cave painters were asking 30,000 years ago. The question never changed, only the answers did. So here is what I want you to think about. If ancient humans with no language, no teachers, and no scripture independently arrived at belief in something beyond themselves on every continent, in every era, without ever communicating with each other, is it possible that the belief was never invented at all? Is it possible that it was always already there, waiting, built into something deeper than culture, deeper than language, deeper than memory? And if that is true, what exactly is it that has been living inside the human mind quietly for 30,000 years?